All right, good evening. I'm going to call this meeting to order. This meeting of the Denville Township Board of Education is being held in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act. Notice of this meeting was provided to the Daily Record and with the Star Ledger of Morris County, has been delivered to the Township Clerk, and has been placed on the bulletin board of the Board of Education office and each of the school buildings in the district. Roll call, please.
Mr. Capello?
Here.
Mrs. Wagner?
Here.
Mr. Cass?
Here.
Mr. Kim?
Here.
Dr. Aruna Datasan?
Here.
Dr. Moore?
Here.
Mr. Anderson?
Here. We do not have a need for executive session prior to our meeting, so we'll move on to the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you for joining us this evening. First on our agenda is special presentations. We're going to have the Denville Schools Demographic Study by Dr. Richard Grip of Statistical Forecasting. He is with us virtually. For those of you who may be listening online or following us, you can find his presentation on our website. That's denville.org. If you go to Board of Education and then you go to Presentations and Notices, under Facilities, Board of Education, Facilities, and then Presentations and Notices, you'll be able to find in that section both his presentation as well as his demographic study. So without any further ado, Dr. Grip, I'll turn the floor over to you, sir.
Wonderful. Good evening. Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me well?
Yes.
Great. Okay, with no further ado, I'm going to present a PowerPoint and share my screen. Okay, so everyone should be seeing a cover page for the demographic study, and if you do not, please let me know. I'm moving on to the next slide, which is just a little bit of an overview of our company. So tonight I'm going to be talking for about 20 minutes, maybe 25, regarding the demographic study. It's really long, it's over 80 pages, and I'm going to try to do it justice by talking about what we did. So bear with me tonight, and if you do have questions, please wait to the end of the presentation, especially with this format. It's a little difficult not seeing anybody. However, just a little bit of background of our company. Our company is called Statistical Forecasting. We do just demographic studies for school districts. We've been working in the New York, New Jersey metropolitan area since the last 25 years approximately. And we've done about 200 school districts of demographic studies in this time period. And we are the chief demographic consultant for the New York City Public Schools, doing this type of work since 2006. I'm the executive director of the firm. I have a doctorate from Rutgers University in the Graduate School of Ed Measurements Program. Previously was a teacher at Bell Barton way back when, and went to Bridgewater, Raritan as a physics and statistics teacher, and that's when, while I was there, I got my doctoral degree and then moved into demography. So I do have an educational background in the sciences, and I still publish in this area of school demography, both locally, nationally, and testify as an expert witness as a school demographer in administrative law court hearings when two districts want a divorce to each other, which usually happens in a sending-receiving agreement situation. So today, I'm going to this slide here is going to give you an overview of what was done. Now, most people think of a demographic study as just projecting enrollments, which is the big headliner, and you can see it there. The first bullet is we project enrollments for a 5-year period from the 22-23 year through 26-27. And the first question I usually get is, why don't we look out 10 or 15 or 20 years? And the real problem we have with projecting enrollments is then we have to start projecting kids who are not born yet. And that can be done for a large city like New York, but some place like Denville it's much smaller, much more difficult to do. So we start by looking at the macro, which is the township, by looking at community population trends, racial and socioeconomic characteristics, birth counts, fertility rates, things like that. Then we move on to the school level, school district, and we look at historical enrollments for the last decade, not only by the whole district, but by grade configuration, which is elementary and middle, and also by school. And we also did a special analysis in this report by race and poverty status for each of the 3 schools in the district. Next, we were asked to compute what's called student yields, which are simply children per housing unit for Denville's housing property database, so that you could project the number of students that come from new housing that is projected to occur in the township. Next, we looked at the building capacities to see if the current and projected enrollments the buildings can handle the number of students that are going to be in there. Next, we looked at the new housing starts that are projected to occur in the district, in the township, and tried to determine what the impact would be. And finally, we projected enrollments on a completely different analysis called the housing turnover analysis, based upon student yields and housing turnover rates, historical housing turnover rates of homes in the township. So let's move on to what we actually looked at. So the first thing you're seeing here is Denville's population historically. Everything to the left of this vertical line right here is census data from 1940 to 2020. So you can see that your current population roughly is over 17,000 people. And the right-hand side of the screen from 2030 to 2040 is from a third-party organization called the North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority. It's not a projection that I came up with. It's something from a third-party organization. So they're basically projecting modest growth in the next 20 years or so. So the township, interestingly enough, like much of America, is becoming less white over time and more of other non-white races. So for instance, in Denville, you're about 79% white in 2020, 8% Asian roughly, and 7.5% Hispanic. But the Asian Hispanic populations have been increasing since 2010, whereas the white population has been declining. By 2045, roughly the whole country should be a majority-minority country, where you would have whites not being the majority race in the country. So the median age in the township is quite high. It's 45 years old compared to New Jersey, which is 44. Not much foreign-born in the township. Compared to the state, you can see only 10% as opposed to 23% in the state. India and China are the two largest sources of foreign-born population. This is a very highly educated community based on the bachelor's degree or higher being about 58%, and the median household income reflects that, which is about $40,000 higher than the state at $126,000. 6,800 housing units, of which 83% are single-family homes, either attached or detached, and 17% of housing units in the township are owner-occupied, which is much less than the state average. The median value of an owner-occupied unit is $420,000, and just to refresh your memory from statistics, a median is the 50th percentile, which means that 50% of the values are above that number and 50% are below. So here's showing the township and the 3 schools. Route 46, as you can see, and Route 80 bisect the township. This is showing the elementary attendance areas for Riverview and Lakeview, where the red line is separating the two, and really that's Route 46. But the next slide is showing what's called a flex zone, which the school district has the ability to move students from one attendance area to the other based upon the capacities in the building. So if one building is more overcrowded than the other, the administration has the authority to move students to the other building to make sure that buildings are not crowded. So historically, your enrollments are always looked at from a point in time being October the 15th. Consider that the census day every year. So your most current enrollment from October 15th of 2021 is 1629. And your enrollments have been declining through the 15-16 year. When we look at a 10-year period, it declined through 15-16 before stabilizing. So the enrollment this year, at 1629 is about 115 students less than 10 years ago, and the 12-13 year was 1744. So we use something called the cohort survival ratio method to project enrollments 5 years out, and that's approved by the BOE. So here's the enrollments over time. You can see this decline I was mentioning earlier through 15, 16 right to here, and it's been fairly stable for the last 7 or 8 years. When we look at the enrollments at the elementary and middle school level, we see a little different story. So the elementary enrollments declined through 15, 16 before stabilizing, and they kind of reversed trend a little bit in this last year. 1,092 is the enrollment at the elementary level, which is the greatest enrollment in the last 10 years. At the middle school level, a little different. It's been pretty much declining through the last decade, losing about 125 students over this time period. So this one I'm going to go through pretty quick. This is how we project enrollments. I just want to make sure people understand this is how we do it, so it's not a mystery. But what we do is we compute what's called the survival rates or progression rates of each of the grade levels, going back as far as 10 years. So I'll give you a really simple example. Say we have 100 first graders in the 2021 year, and we have 95 second graders in the 21-22 year, they advance up. So you lose a net of 5 students. So the progression rate for grade 1 to 2 is 95 over 100, or 0.95. And we compute these progression rates for all of the grade progressions, like I said, going back 10 years. Birth kindergarten is our first one, which is a 5-year gap. And then our last one is grade 7 to 8. So there's 9 possible grade progressions. If the ratios are above 1, you're gaining students, it's inward migration. And if the ratio is below 1, it's outward migration. And this is one thing I want you to pay attention to, if anything all night long. For all 9 ratios in the 5-year average, we're about 1.00, which is indicating that you have inward migration in the district. This is pretty rare for me to see. I usually don't see every single grade progression being above 1. So you definitely have a steady stream of people coming from other towns into the community to be educated in Denville. So once we compute these average ratios, usually over a 4 or 5-year average, we use that to compute future enrollments by multiplying each of the current enrollments by the ratios. So you have a phenomenon in the township, the school district, which is called negative kindergarten replacement. And it's occurred in each of the last 9 years, and it's been ranging from 6 to 83 students per year. And what negative kindergarten replacement is, well, the number of entering kindergarten students is less than those who graduate from the 8th grade from the prior year. So let me give you an example. It's really simple. Say you had 100 students graduating in 8th grade. For you to have steady enrollment, just from the 8th grade to the kindergarten population, you would need to match the graduating 8th grade cohort with 100 kindergarten students. But you haven't been able to do that in the last decade. You might come up with 70 kindergarten students and you'd be down 30 out of the gate before you begin the year. So, but in the last 2 years, something interesting has happened. You've had larger entering kindergarten classes and smaller graduating 8th grade classes as the smaller elementary cohorts move through the system. And what's happening because of that is that the negative kindergarten replacement values are getting smaller. And you can see right here. That's always a sign for me that you're not going to have much enrollment decline anymore, like you did way back in this period, back around 15, 16, 16, 17, so on and so forth. Now, this is a graph that is showing the enrollment change in blue, year over year for the district, mapped up against the kindergarten replacement. And what's interesting here, if you take a look at every single bar, that even though you're losing students to kindergarten replacement, you have so much inward migration going on in the district that the enrollment change is not as much of a loss as the kindergarten replacement. So let me give you an example here. You lost 7 students in the 1920 year to your kindergarten replacement, but you actually gained 46 students overall because of this inward migration. So the inward migration is either offsetting the negative kindergarten replacement and or causing an enrollment gain totally by offsetting the negative kindergarten replacements. Fairly interesting what's going on here. So births are used to project kindergarten students 5 years later. We collected birth data from the Department of Health for the 2007 and 19 period. After a period of decline, births have reversed trend in the township and have increased in the last 5 years. Here's the picture showing that. You can see this decline down to the 2014 year where we had 139 births. Now you're going back the other way. Increasing birth rates is the biggest correlation with increasing kindergarten students. Keep that in mind as we go forward tonight. So this slide is showing the number of births in Denville over time in the second column. How many students come in 5 years later? And what's the birth to kindergarten ratio, which is simply the kindergarten student total divided by the birth total. 5 years later, you can see what's happened here is that you had full day K beginning in the September 2013 year. And typically for districts who have half day K, you have the values of the B to K ratio much less than 1, because parents are sending their kids elsewhere for kindergarten, and then they come into the public school district for first grade. And what we'll usually see, as soon as one district switches to a full day program, the birth to kindergarten ratios start to go up. And that's exactly what's happened here, and you can see in the most 4 or 5 years, they're well above 1, which is telling me that you're gaining students from other towns besides Denville Township in terms of those who come for kindergarten. So we also took the births by what's called census block from the Department of Health, and we mapped them to find out where exactly the births are occurring in the 2 different attendance areas. Some of the births of the mothers, we knew they were from Denville mothers, but we didn't know exactly where in the township they were located. So that's what that unknown column is on the far right. But what's interesting is that Lakeview has had about double the amount of births over time as opposed to Riverview. And this map, in the next couple of slides, you're going to start to see that if we look at the births by block in 2007, the greatest number of births were in the Lakeview section, that's dark blue. And in time, we fast forward to the current, which is 2019, the most recent, and you can see where the greatest number of births are occurring. But if you just toggle back and forth, you can see that the shades are getting more green and dark and blues, which is indicating an increase in the births in those blocks over time. When we look at the births over the whole 12-year period and aggregate them, these dark blue regions are showing where the greatest number of births occurred in the last 12 or 13 years. So the age pyramid of Denville Township helps describe some of the things that's going on. So an age pyramid is simply demography 101, where we plot the percentage of males and females back to back for each of the age classes from 0 to 4 all the way to 85 up. In 2010, the largest groups in Denville were the 45 to 49 age groups for both males and females. That is not a great age group to be your largest if you're going to try to grow a school district, because obviously people don't usually have too many kids at that point in time. You can see also not many people in the 20s and 30s, because probably people cannot afford to move into Denville. So you have this really kind of a middle-aged group, which is your biggest group in 2010. Now, we're going to advance it almost 10 years, because we cannot get data for 2020 as of yet. So we're getting it from something called the 2015 to 19 American Community Survey. And you can see that if you just toggle this, take a look at the center line where 45 to 49, and we now go, everybody's getting older, not too many people are dying. So the community's getting even older, and the largest group for males and females in this period is now 60 to 64. So if we look at the change over time, for each one of the age brackets, the biggest decliners are in red, and the biggest gainers are in blue. So the biggest gainers are mostly in the senior citizen population between 60 and 69, as you can see right here. And 55 to 59 is one of the big decliners, actually, for males. And the 10 to 14 population is the big decliner for females, which would correspond approximately with children in grades 5 to 9. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, we're also looking at enrollments by race. And as I mentioned at the outset, the township is getting more racially diverse, and that is also occurring at the school district level, where whites are declining slightly from 76% to about 72.6%. And the second largest race in the district is Hispanic, which has grown from about 10 to 12. Asians are the third largest race. So that's district-wide. Let's take a look at it by school. This is just for the 21-22 school year. And what you can see here in red down at the bottom, the largest race is white in the district. The second largest race is Hispanic, which is in purple. The reason I colored Lakeview and Riverview is to show you that there is a difference in the percentage of whites in Riverview as opposed to Lakeview. Riverview's got about 12 percentage points higher in whites compared to Lakeview, which has a higher Hispanic and Asian population. We also looked at the economically disadvantaged student population, which are students who receive free or reduced lunch. There's really not that many kids in the district that have free or reduced lunch. Only 68 students back in 2016-17 school year, which is about 4.1% of the population. Fast forward to today, only 71 students have free and reduced lunch, which is 4.4%, so it's not really much different. But what is different is if you dig deeper into the report, which we're not really going to here, is that the Lakeview School has consistently had a greater number of economically disadvantaged students than Riverview in the last 6 years. For instance, Lakeview would average between 30 and 49 economically disadvantaged students, where Riverview has been averaging between 4 and 9 students, which is a big difference. This shows you the percentage of students who are economically disadvantaged in each school. And that kind of alludes to what I just mentioned, that Lakeview does have a higher percentage as opposed to Riverview. So let's talk about the new housing that is proposed in the township, which I contacted planning and zoning at Denville Township. They were very helpful, and they gave us a list of 4 developments. Most of these developments here are as a result of the August 2020 settlement agreement between the township and the Fair Share Housing Center, whereby the township is going to have to start building some affordable housing units. So this table shows you the name of the development and the location. All of the 4 developments are in the Lakeview attendance area. The number of units, the type of unit, they're all multifamily, such as apartments, duplexes, and townhouses, and how many are affordable as opposed to how many are market rate. So to make a long story short, there's about 300 housing units that are planned. This does not include another development called the Lanard development, which was recently sold to D.H. Horton, and has plans have changed since Lanard was going to build it, which is going to be about 106 units on Third Lawn Road. So this is not included in the table because the plans of the new development were not released. But our GIS analysts put together a map showing exactly where those 4 developments are going to be located all in the Lakeview attendance area. So as I mentioned earlier in the outset, one of the goals of our study tonight was to determine student yields per housing unit so we could determine the impact of the development. And what we did is we took the student address database of the school district and we joined it to the property database of Denville Township. And we came up with 3 different housing types. 1 to 4 family homes, where we then extracted out all the townhouses and condos and age-restricted units. So you're really getting mostly detached single families or duplexes. So the average is 0.47 children per housing unit. And that's only grades K-8 Montague. It does not include high school students. The townhouse average in the township is 0.22, which is pretty small, and 0.09 is the average for apartments. So with these values, we were able to estimate that of the 299 housing units, about 75 public school children are projected. And of course, there is additional children projected for grades 9 to 12, they're not discussed here. I should tell you it's a rough estimate as the bedroom distributions were not available for some of the developments. But we did take that into consideration in modifying the enrollment projections based upon these 75 new children. This is just showing you all the research that we did for student yields for townhouses. We did internet research on the 8 different townhouse developments in the township, collecting information on their average sale price, year built, number of bedrooms, number of units, and then of course how many students that actually live in there from the Denville Township School District database. The Forges has the highest student yield of any townhouse development in the township. We do the same thing for apartments. The apartments are really not generating children because the bedrooms, the yields are so small in 1 and 2 bedroom units. And that's why the overall township yield is only 0.091, because you don't really have many developments or any developments with 3 bedrooms. That's where you start to see children. When we look at home sales, which definitely has a factor in student enrollments, because when we see periods of high turnover, you would expect in your community that the buyers would be families with children. So this is showing the period of home sales from 1994 to 2021, where the sales were quite high in the early 2000s, declined in the late 2000s due to the housing crash, banking crisis, and then a rebound. But you can see the rebound is not quite as high in the number of sales as compared to prior to the housing market crash. So the number of sales have been somewhere in the low 400s the last 5 years, but they were in the upper 400s prior to the crash. And this is just showing where all the sales are by census block. If you aggregate them for the last 6 years, from 2016 to 21, most number of sales are up in the Riverview and Appendix area. So let's talk about the projections. I did 2 sets of projections. One, assuming that the developments that I mentioned in the previous slides do not come to fruition or are not built in the timeline that I had laid out as an assumption in the report. But even without considering the new housing, you can see that enrollments are projected to go up, gaining 190 students over the next 5 years. If we factor in the housing, assuming that everything gets built and occupied in the next 5 years, the increase is even further. We're talking somewhere around 248 student gain in the next 5 years. This is showing what the gains would look like at the elementary and the middle the elementary and the middle school configurations. You can see that for the baseline and the adjusted at the elementary level, we're looking at 133 or 164 additional students, less of an impact at the middle school, 5784. The capacity of the buildings were also analyzed with respect to the current enrollment and with respect to the projected enrollment. Now, I should say that the capacity of the building is not a fixed entity that will never change. It's based upon how the building is used currently. So if your board has a policy that a classroom should only have 20 students in a class to a teacher, you can easily compute the number of the capacity of the building by multiplying the number of classrooms by that 20 student per classroom policy. So, if you change your policies, you can change the capacity, or if you change the number of special ed classes, which have fewer students in the building, you can also lower capacity. So I just want to give you a heads up about that. For Riverview, you're seeing 2 numbers, one that considers the annex and one that does not. Red values are showing a shortage of seating. We also refer to it as unhoused students. The blue values are considered surpluses. So really what this is showing you is you have a minor shortage of seating at Lakeview right now. You're basically at capacity according to this calculation with the annex, as well as at Valley View. But in time, using the higher projections with the adjustments due to the new housing, you're seeing all the values turn to red, and pretty significantly so, indicating that you're projected to have a shortage of seating in the next 5 years. All right, the last piece of our study tonight, and then we'll wrap it up, is the housing turnover analysis. And the housing turnover analysis is a completely independent analysis using houses and not students to project enrollment. It was created by some colleagues of mine out of Cal Berkeley, and we only do this analysis for the 1 to 4 family homes in the community. We take out all the townhouses and condos and age-restricted units. We should not use the values from this analysis to do any kind of building work in the future or additions. We should use the ones on the previous slide if you're going to consider that. There are 3 inputs to this analysis. First, we look at the housing turnover rates by length of ownership. I'll talk about that in a moment. We look at the current distribution of homes by length of ownership. And then we do something, the next last input is the student yields by length of ownership. And what we find out is that length of ownership is really critical because what we find is that you have more children at homes that are owned at low lengths of ownership, say 0 to 8 years. After 8 to 10 years of ownership, kids would age out of the school district, go up to the high school and graduate. So the yields in homes that are owned a very long period of time, the student yields are very, very low. So the first thing we talked about is turnover rates, and this is the most difficult thing that we have to do. We use parcel level data, which means the individual house in the township, to track each individual home through its life cycle. And a life cycle just means when it sells or if it does not sell. And the database that we get from the state contains all the sale dates, sale prices, and the year that the home was built. And we collected data from 1994 to 2020. We do have some data for 2021, but we had to eliminate it because we need a full year to do this analysis. And there was nothing available prior to 1994. So I'm just going to give you a simple example here. We're going to follow each year's cohort of homes beginning in 1994 to see when they sell. So for instance, if we had a home that was built in 1980 and it sold in 3 different years, 2002, 8, and 2012, it's actually part of 3 separate cohorts. The first length of ownership is actually going to be 8 years from 1994 to 2002. That's actually a mistake, it's not 6. The second length of ownership is 4 years, and the current length of ownership is 8, from 2012 to 2020. So when we took a look at your average turnover rates by over time, this is a distribution showing the percentage of homes that turn over based upon their length of ownership. And what this shows really is that the greatest percentage of homes that turn over are in the early lengths of ownership, the low lengths of ownership. So you have your greatest turnover rate at 4 years of ownership, which is 4.6%, which is right here. As we go on in time, if you have a home that's owned 25 years, it's not very likely to sell. And then that's probably counterintuitive to a lot of people that think that older homes always have higher sell rates, but that is not the case through a lot of the research that we've done, not only through your district, but for others that I've done work for as well. So this is showing how many homes are owned at each length of ownership based upon when the most recent sale occurred, that was a valid sale. And you can see that most of the homes are sold that are owned are in these low lengths of ownership down here between 0 and 5 years. This is showing the number of students per housing unit by length of ownership. And you can see once again, yields start to increase, number of students increase per housing unit, but as length of ownership increases, and then it starts to decline rapidly as the length of ownership increases. So the projection methodology is fairly similar. We take the current rate of home ownership distribution, which was 2 slides ago, and apply the historical turnover rates at each length of ownership to either advance the homes to the next year of ownership or sell them and have them return down to 0 years of ownership. So we then have 5 years of a home ownership distribution that we are actually computing. And we're then going to multiply each one of the number of homes at each length of ownership by the student yield distribution, which I just showed, to get the number of students, which is what we get right here. I did two different scenarios. The first scenario looked at just the average turnover rates in the last 25 years, and I assumed for homes that are owned more than 27 years, I assumed the turnover rate a little higher than the historical average, which was around 44%. In that case, you can see that enrollments are projected to be fairly stable, not much of a change. However, the average turnover rates really aren't reflective, in my opinion, of what's going to happen here in the next 5 years. The average turnover rates in 1994 and 1920 in Denville are shown in green. The maximum turnover rates over time are in purple, the minimum are in red. We use, for the second scenario, this turnover rates in blue, which is a modified turnover rate, which is higher than the historical average, but less than the maximum turnover rates, to reflect the strong housing market that we've been seeing. And with that, this is the results that we get for the number of students. It's actually projected to decline a little bit over time. So the answer to this analysis is that you're not projected to see enrollment increases due to housing turnover. Other things are projected to cause enrollment increases in your school district. We'll talk about, in summary, in a moment, what those are. So it probably would not be good for me tonight to not even mention COVID, since it's so present in our lives. It's had a dramatic impact on enrollment across the country. I used to live in New Jersey and now live in Vermont. After many years of enrollment declining, Vermont has actually had an increase. But you can see some of the statistics in the third bullet. There's so many places around the country that have had very, very large enrollment decline. So the big question we all have right now as demographers are, we know that people are leaving large metro areas, either to live in rural or suburban areas. They might either be living in their second home, they might be purchasing a home. The question is, will they return to their primary home, or are they going to stay in their secondary homes? We don't really know. So in summary, enrollments are projected to increase throughout a 5-year projection period due to the following 3 reasons. Number one, an increasing birth rate in the last several years in Denville Township. Number two, an inward migration of students as your grade progression ratios are showing increase year over year for all 9 average ratios. And third reason is there are 300 new housing units projected in the township, and there could even be more once the DH courtroom development gets approved, if it gets approved. So with that, I'll turn it back to the board president to ask any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Grip. I appreciate that. That was well prepared. I appreciate all the work on it. I will turn it over to see if anybody has any questions from the board. Mr. Kim?
Dr. Grip, thank you for this wonderful presentation. It really did enlighten me personally. Some of the things that we might expect, as well as a lot of suspicions that some board members had. The one question I had, because there seems to be, in summary, a potential significant increase over the next 5 years. How many times have you done studies for districts where you would come back in 5 years where you might see an ebb and a flow? So there might be confirmation that you get the increase in 5 years, but the next 5 years might be projected to sort of slide back down and dwindle, and you sort of have this sort of wave-like motion. How often do you see that?
All right, that's a great question. The wave-like motion that you discussed actually does not happen so much over a 5-year period. Once a district starts to increase or decline, it takes a long time to move the students that are either smaller in size or greater in size through the system. So it could take up to 10 years before we see an inflection where the trends reverse. So it would not be likely for me, if I come back in 3 or 4 years, to see much of a change in trend as of yet, because it does take time, like I said, to have students move into the system and out of the system.
Great, thank you.
Dr. Grip, again, also thank you for your presentation. It was excellent. My question is, could you maybe give a little transparency on the, I guess, the connection or maybe the disconnect between housing turnover, which you say isn't necessarily going to contribute to increased student enrollment, and the inbound migration? Because in my mind, inbound migration only really happens if people are buying houses in Denville and bringing students in. So could you maybe give me a little clarity on that?
Sure, that's another good question. So the inward migration from the cohorts of evaluation method, which is used to project the enrollments, we're actually seeing that specifically because the students are actually moving into the school district. They're being captured by our enrollment counts. The analysis for the housing turnover is not looking at the individual people that are in a house when it's being purchased or sold. That's one of the difficulties we have with housing turnover, is we don't have individual records of the people that are moving in and out. So I don't have the ability with the housing turnover piece to reflect that inward migration that you're referring to, because we don't know the specific characteristics of the home buyers and all the people that live inside it. I hope that answers that.
That does, thank you. And actually, I had a follow-up, if that's all right. So I think it seems like we had two fairly big black swan events in this period, and I'm not even talking about COVID. You had 9/11, right, which I think resulted in a significant little baby boom and people fleeing to the suburbs to some extent. And then you had the housing crisis in 2008, which seemed to have resulted in people not selling their homes. And I think one of those charts really showed that, the housing turnover. So I guess my question is how confident are you in your numbers in that you've taken those kind of two outlier events into account? Because I know your time frame kind of includes both of those.
Right, so one of the things that we rely on here in generating the projections are the cohort survival ratios from the last 5 years. So we're not even capturing any of the things from the housing market crash from 2008 to 12, because it was too long ago. So I'm really looking at the factors and variables that are most recent. And to be honest with you, the biggest drivers of enrollment in your district is right here, this one right here. You got a big increase in birth rates in the last 6 years. 40 children from 2013 to 2019 is pretty significant in a place such as yours. And assuming that all these students, or most of them, do not move out of Denville by the time they hit kindergarten, you're going to be seeing these kids. So the greatest predictors of projections are birth rates and those students who are already in the system. So I feel pretty confident, even regardless of all the other things that you mentioned with respect to the housing market crash and things like that, you are going to see an increase in the future because of some of the births that I'm referring to in the larger kindergarten sizes that have occurred in the last couple of years.
Great, thank you.
Dr. Grip, if I might just kind of add on to that, when you look at this graph that you've got up in front of us now, which is birth rates, do you look at historically how accurate that has been prior? In other words, so we've had quite a few demographic studies since I've been on the board, and what we find is that they're largely inaccurate. And so that's what I'm trying to figure out, how we can determine this is going to be more accurate.
Yeah, I mean, that's, we always have different benchmarks that we try to shoot for in terms of accuracy. And I'm going to tell you what mine is and what we should have in the field. So we estimate a 1% error rate per year. So that would indicate that in a 5-year projection, at the end of 5 years, if we're within 5% of what we projected, that would be considered a good projection. And I would say that 3/4 to about 80% of the time, I'm within that. It takes something usually like COVID or a district policy change, maybe going from a half day to a full day at kindergarten, for instance, for a lot of the projections to fall outside of those parameters I just mentioned. So the other thing that you have here is, I brought this slide up. If you talk about the birth to kindergarten ratios over time, one thing that could make the district's projections inaccurate quickly is the change from birth to kindergarten. So if you had someone come in here 5 years ago, and they were reflecting on, or using the birth to kindergarten ratios in the top part of this screen, they're going to be way off, because there's no way they could probably even take into account and estimate what the full day impact, a full day kindergarten impact would have been. Even if you hired me, I'm going to be quite honest with you, it would be really hard for me to estimate a jump from, say, 0.758 up to 1.03. So I think now that the full day program has been in for many years, 9 years or so, I think that the enrollment projection accuracy in the district by this report is going to be much better in the future.
Thank you. And I'll ask one more question too. On the kindergarten to 8th grade kind of survival rate, or the turnover, whatever, I forget what you called it, but 20, one more back, I think it was. One more slide back.
Yeah, let's see. Got it.
Yep, that's it. So talk to, I know COVID, but talk to me about 2020, 2021.
Sure. Well, 2021, definitely, that's the effects of COVID. Don't know exactly everything that happened in your community, but if it's like most that I'm dealing with, we saw a lot of withdrawals where students were being educated at home, homeschooling, or went to private school. This -6 is indicating to me that your kindergarten cohort sizes have gotten bigger, and the 8th grade population over time has been getting smaller, because you're finally moving out all those smaller grade levels through the system. Now, I think you probably got more of your students back here in 21, 22, otherwise you would probably see a very large negative value again. That's why I think it probably was only for 1 or 2 COVID years.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Dean?
Yeah, I actually had one more, and I hate to monopolize the time. Could you go to that slide with the current age distribution for the town?
Sure.
Yeah, so my question is in your experience, is there a point, I mean, you said that we're an older town, right? I mean, we're older than most. In your experience, is there a point, obviously, where that kind of flips, and does that flip in a significant way? In other words, do you get to a point where the distribution is old enough that all of a sudden a whole bunch of people sell their homes, and you really get kind of a shift in a fairly short period of time?
That's a really good question. Unfortunately, I've been getting this question actually for the last 10 years from a lot of people, a lot of districts in Morris County. So I do a lot of work in Morris. I just was in Montville last week. I'm going to Booton on Wednesday. They're very similar in terms of the shape of their age distributions. And I keep getting that question, gosh, we got the 60 to 65 population up here, 70, 74. Wouldn't you just expect that a lot of these people are going to sell their homes and it's going to flip this whole thing around? Well, I got something to tell you. A lot of 25s and 30-somethings, they can't afford to get into these kinds of towns in Morris County because it's just too expensive and the property taxes are too high. Plus, they don't want to live there. They prefer to live in a more urban core center where there's a lot of things going on right in the suburbs. So who's going to be coming in? Eventually, it's going to be people probably in their late 30s and early 40s. But the quick turnover from the older generation to the, say, the 30-something generation, or even the 40-something, doesn't happen as quick as you think. One study I just read said that most people in their 60s and 70s don't want to sell their home because they have grandchildren either living in the same town or in a very close proximity to where they're living, and or they're very involved in their community and volunteering and activities. So they still want to stay put. So it kind of goes against common thought that you're going to see everybody moving to North Carolina at once. It's just not happening.
Or Vermont, right? But thank you.
Too cold. No one's moving here.
Dr. Griff, again, thank you for your presentation.
Dr. Grip, can you hear Laura?
I cannot.
If you'd like, you want to switch on.
How about now?
I can.
Okay, so I just want to go back to Mr. Kim's question about that turnover time. And that wave formation you were talking about. You spoke about the birth rate being the largest indicator, and you start to see that as an upward trend in one of your graphs starting in 2017. So am I understanding right then that, in theory, with what you had reported, that even though this is a 5-year study, that we would still see an upward trend going from 2017 then to 2027?
I think I'm going to change some of the years that you just mentioned. So if this is the upward trend in the birth rates, right? Let's advance these 5 years for kindergarten students. This would be 2022 to 2024. So this would be indicating a larger kindergarten students entering the district in those 3 years. For 25 and 6, I had to average the historical births because we don't have, like I said, an estimate of what births are going to be. And once those bigger cohorts get into the system, they have to move through, and that's what's causing the increase in the elementary school population more than middle school in one of the later slides I was showing. But I didn't go out to 2027 like you mentioned. I can only go out to the 2026, 20-27 year, 2026.
Okay, so then, I'm sorry, I guess my more specific question was the 10-year wave formation that you were talking about when you were answering Mr. Kim's question. When would you say that started?
The 10-year what formation?
Right?
Waves and the ebbs and flows.
Yeah, the ebbs and flows and the wave formation that you were talking about with one of the first board members' questions?
Yeah, that's a good question because, so I don't, this is the first time I've worked in your district, so I don't have the full historical enrollment of your district. But looking at this, the historical enrollment from the last 10 years, you can see the decline here in this past 3. I mean, maybe Dr. Forte would know, but if I had to guess, my thinking would probably be that you were probably declining since somewhere around 2006 or so. It was probably declining for a while, and then it stabilized. And this is the first time when enrollment stabilized like this, that's the first indicator that it's about ready to change in trend. So you're never going to see the enrollments decline and then suddenly go back up straight up in the other direction the next year. It takes a few years in stabilization before it starts to make that turn. But since I only studied back 10 years, I don't know with certainty exactly, when the ebbs and flows really occurred. But that would be my guess. It would be somewhere, it probably peaked somewhere around 2005.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Don.
Dr. Grip, it was a great presentation. I've been on the board to witness, I think it's 3 is the number of prior demographic studies, and they were terrible and inaccurate. And your study here, the level of detail is amazing to what I've seen in the past, to those other studies, the extra variables, the data, the demographics, the social demographics, very helpful in understanding the composition of our town relevant to our students. The one question I have is, when I first joined the board, we were talking and trying to tee up a new middle school because of the overcrowded conditions. We had trailers on the learning cottages, as they were called, the politically correct term. We had learning cottages housing students and teachers, and it wasn't a really good place we were in back then, but it was necessary, and we got by with it. So all of a sudden we have what I call the Big Bang events. We had some major flooding in town. We had an October snowstorm that put people without electricity for weeks, close to a month for some people. And we also had a recession. And all of a sudden, the student population started to trend downward. One example of the effects of those storms, the town bought out 11 houses for flood mediation and remediation, and a lot of people had to go, live with relatives and things like that. So when you've done all these studies, many of them we previewed before we hired you to do this study, have you seen any big bang events like that that have drastically affected the outcome, 5 years later in these school districts?
I have to think about that. To be honest with you, I mean, of course, everybody's different. But most of the ones that we look at, typically, they hold true to form. And I really haven't had any situations when I'm just trying to think of a town, for instance, that something really cataclysmic happened. I can't think of anything like that. The biggest cataclysmic event is COVID. I mean, that's been devastating for me as a professional to have to, that might be a strong word, but it's just, it's very challenging to try to work with that in the projections because, we could not obviously ever forecast a pandemic and what the impact it would have on projections. So that's the biggest cataclysmic event I can think of.
Yeah, I would agree. It's unusual when you have those catastrophic events. My board colleague and neighbor, Mr. Capello here, we have created a Cass-Capello hypothesis. When we see the people walking around our neighborhoods now with strollers, my neighbor across the street has twins, so a double stroller. So, and we see that in your study too. We're going through some housing turnover town with a lot of old timers are dying or going to retirement communities, selling their houses and everything. You were seeing a younger generation coming in. That's certainly going to be affecting the student population over time, along with the birth rate too. And I talked to some of these people when they sign up for soccer. They said, "We just moved to Denville. We want to find out about your soccer program." I said, "Oh, where'd you move from?" So a lot of them are immigrating from the big cities and the smaller cities too for the quality of life that our town offers.
I'm not surprised, and you have a great school district, and when you have a great school district, those B to K numbers, those ratios I showed, when they're well above 1, you can congratulate yourself and pat yourself on the back because that's why they are the way they are, is because people want to educate their kids in your school district.
Dr. Grip, so just another question that's kind of more of just your opinion, I guess. You talked a little bit about the new developments, and you talked about the younger generation and what they desire for a living scenario. What is your thought on the potential that, the younger generation prefers the rentals of a smaller unit, and then all of a sudden we see a jump in the ratios that come out of, or the yields, that come out of those smaller developments where, I know the 1 and 2 bedroom probably not, but certainly 3 bedroom. I know we're talking about one of those larger developments, that 3 bedroom with a den, which we keep saying could be 4 bedroom in a heartbeat, right? And so what's your general thought or feeling, or maybe even any data you guys have to show on kind of the potential for some of those developments that typically don't have a large yield to have a larger yield in the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, believe it or not, I've done a research presentation with 2 colleagues. One guy, he's the king in New Jersey. His name's Dave Lissigan, and he's the guy who wrote the report called the Rutgers Multiplier Book, which a lot of people use as being the Bible, more or less, for the state averages at a certain kinds of units. So Dave and I did a presentation along with another gentleman from Pennsylvania, and what we showed was the student yields from 1970 to the present for the different types of housing units for all the different bedroom distributions. And what we saw was a continual decline in the student yields in all the different configurations per housing unit. So to answer your question, I don't see those rates going up. If anything, I kind of see the number of kids per housing unit continuing to decline over time.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board? Cliff? James? Steve, Sandy, any questions from either of you?
Damaris and I already had a call with Dr. Grip, so we're good with it.
Well, Dr. Grip, I'll say thank you. I would echo some of Don's comments earlier. I've sat through, I think, probably at least 2 or 3 of those demographic presentations in the past, and certainly didn't come close to the level of detail that you provided, the expertise and everything. I'll thank Mr. Kim, who has been pushing to get you to provide this demographic study and presentation, and Dr. Forte and the administration for their support of it. So thank you very much, sir. We appreciate it, and look forward to continuing working with you in the future.
You're welcome. Thank you, Mr. Anderson, and the rest of the board.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
You too.
Thank you, Dr. Grip.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay. Let's move on with our agenda. In the future meeting, Steve, when are we going to have the HIB and SSDS report? Is that the next meeting?
It's today.
It's today. Okay. Then the floor is yours, sir.
Okay, in your packet, you'll see the HIB and Student Safety Data System report for July 1 through December 31, 2021. There were 0 cases of substance abuse or weapons reported in the district. There were 7 investigations of HIB. Remember, this is from July 1 to December 31. Anything that happened after that would not be included. There were 7 investigations and 2 confirmed HIB cases. There was 0 instances of vandalism, 0 instances of violence. Remember, these are reported as we have to report to the state. So there are certain things that are required. There has to be somebody that can be a perpetrator. We have to know who the perpetrator is of it. It has to happen after. For some of these events, it has to happen during the school season. So there's a few different rules. This is a snapshot that we have to report to the state. There were 0 instances of violence. These are specific things. There were 0 instances of suspensions of students with a disability other than violence or vandalism. Police were notified by the district 0 times. There were 15 in-school suspensions and 3 out-of-school suspensions. Also, in that time period of July 1, 2021 through December 31, 2021, we conducted staff, student, parent trainings and programs. We had 19 trainings and 43 programs throughout the district. There were school-wide HIB prevention actions, teaching and learning, student relationships, safety, parental support, physical, emotional environments, and morale in the student community. We also have an event coming up in March. Please see the website and our Friday folder for information. Funded by the Denville PBA. It is Ryan's story. Mr. John Halligan, it'll be his 2nd time presenting. It'll be in the evening at Valley View. It's really worthwhile to come out and see, so please do. And that's it for my report.
Thank you, Dr. Forte. Just a quick question. Vandalism and violence, are those, you said those are specific. That's defined by the state?
Yes, it has to meet certain criteria, so it's not all things that you would think might fit into that would count as something that we have to report.
Thank you. Any questions from the board on the HIB and SSD?
Just a quick question on the suspensions in school and out of school. How does it compare to the historic rates? Is this high, similar, low?
So prior to COVID, so the last year and the year before, totally different. But the year before that is very similar.
Okay.
Please.
Dr. Forte, you described the trainings and programs. Can you just, the 19 trainings and the 43 programs, can you just elaborate for the board and the public a little bit on what classifies as a training or a program?
So a program for the parents and for the public would be something like that, John Halligan coming in. Trainings vary from many different things. Like every year we have to disseminate and we have to review our HIB policy, the board policy with the staff. We also have to disseminate that to the public. So we do that every year in September, late August, whenever we start school. There are other trainings that were required. For example, the board underwent some training with our attorney on HIV. All those types of trainings like that count as programs or trainings that we have to provide.
Any other questions on the board? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Forte. And we'll move on to superintendent's comments.
Okay. Sorry. Taking a minute to load. Okay, our projects at Lakeview, the roof, again, they're just waiting for the weather to break. There's about a half day's worth of work to do on the flashing. Same at the Riverview APR, same thing. Everything's operational. There's just some insulation that needs to be done in the warmer weather. Our district is down to zero positive cases in the district. 2 people are quarantined, and our area is now in the yellow, which is a moderate level of transmission. We will be following along with the governor's recommendation of removing the mandate around masks, and it will become voluntary. And the governor also said that in his statements that it's time for us to start trying to live with COVID, managing it as it becomes endemic. So we are definitely moving in that direction. The information has been sent out to the public. And our sports season's wrapped up, and we'll be getting ready for our spring sports. The winter sports season's wrapped up. We'll be getting ready for our spring sports, and I'll give some updates on that as we move along. That's it for my report.
Thank you, Dr. Forte. Assistant Superintendent's comments, Dr. Cullis.
Thank you. So our kindergarten pre-registration opened February 1st, so if there's anyone out there that wants to or has an of-age student, please make sure to go to our website at denville.org to register. Right now we have 108 in the last 2 weeks, so we're well on our way to that predicted 182. So we'll keep you posted. Black History Month, so we've been having our activities in our classrooms, and also we have a poster and poetry contest, and that ends on February 28th. Information can be also found on our website in the Friday folders. COGATS, which is the Cognitive Ability Test, is administered to grades 2 and 5, and that begins February 28th for 2nd grade, and 5th grade is March 3rd. This concludes the Assistant Superintendent's report.
Thank you, Dr. Cullis. Business Administrator comments. Damaris?
There's a few comments. First of all, you have your 22-23 budget binder with you. Please email me with any questions, and if you would like to meet with me, let me know and we can set up a time, either virtually or in person. Either way is fine with us. In talking about budget, typically the governor's budget address is always the last Tuesday of February, where he gives the budget address, and he also states the they declare the state aid numbers for all 600 districts in New Jersey. This year there is a new bill that they are trying to pass, where they will be postponing the budget address to March 8th. Meaning that the state aid numbers will not be out until probably March 10th, on or before March 10th. And our preliminary budget meeting most likely will be on the 14th of March, if they do not extend the budget to the county, which is typically March 20th. So everything is up in the air right now with state aid until March 10th approximately. My next comment is I'm really excited to report that the district filed 2 Hbac grant back a few months ago, and we just got notified 2 of them were approved. One is with the New Jersey Clean Energy Act. They are awarding 75% of the grant to the district. We submitted $543,000 to change HVAC in in one of our school, the middle school, and we were approved for 75% of that grant. And the other one is a Department of Education grant, again, to improve air quality district-wide in the amount of $36,000, and we just got approved for that one as well. It's all good news.
Well, that was great news. Thank you, Damaris. Thank you for proactively going after those grants, and that's great news to hear that we were awarded some of them. Before I move on to open public discussion, I just want to make a quick comment. Just it has been a long 2 years almost here that we started COVID, and I just wanted to thank the administration for the amount of work they've done. I think all of us in the community have felt a lot of stress over decisions that we've made to make sure that our families, our relatives, our friends were remaining safe and healthy, and also working towards ensuring that we had the correct or the best academic situation for our students, and we know every year, every month is so important for them in their young ages. If you could take the amount of stress that each of us had individually with a kid or a few kids in our households, and multiply that by 16, that's the stress that our administration has felt. And I know personally how much effort they've put in to ensure that we have the safest and best educational experience. And I thank them for that. And I think that the step towards, we've made some big steps in the last couple of years. We were one of the first to come to full day. We're one of the first to come to taking masks off our children. So I think every step of the way we continue to make sure we're doing what's safe, and sometimes the answers don't always come as quick as we had hoped, but that's because Dr. Forte, Dr. Cullis, Mrs. Gorowski are always working to ensure that we're considering our students and our staff. So in the decision recently with the masks, I spoke to Dr. Forte personally several times after the governor's announcement, and his consideration for ensuring that our staff was comfortable, or our professionals that we've been talking to ensured that they felt it was a safe thing to do in Denville, in our district, was important to him, and I applaud him for the amount of effort and work he put into that. So I'm going to move on to our open public discussion. This portion of the meeting is open to any individuals for the purpose of addressing resolutions on this agenda or matters that they find it is important to the Board of Education and is governed by Board Policy 0167 that can be found on our website. Prior to making a comment, members of the public are required to state their names, address, and the subject matter of the comment. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. No participant may speak more than once on the same topic until all others who wish to speak on that topic have been heard. Comments made by members of the public may or may not be responded to by the board or district administration, and a response that is provided will be made at the end of the public comment period after all comments have been heard. The board asks that members of the public be courteous and mindful of the rights of other individuals when speaking. Students and employees have specific legal rights afforded by the laws of New Jersey. Therefore, comments regarding specific students and employees will not be responded to by the board. The board bears no responsibility, nor will it be liable for any comments made by members of the public. Members of the public shall consider their comments in light of the legal rights of those affected or individuals in their comments, and be aware that they are legally responsible and liable for their comments. All statements, questions, or inquiries shall be directed to the board president. And at 8:44, I'm going to open up to open public comments. If anyone would like to make a comment and you are not in the chambers or in the location, you can do it 2 different ways. You can email BOE meeting comments at denville.org. That's BOEMEETINGCOMMENTS at denville.org. Or you can place a comment into the Google Meet. That comment should state your name and address for the record and will be read aloud. Dr. Forte, do we have any emails in the queue at this point?
no emails in the queue.
Okay, we'll wait a few minutes to see if anybody has any comments they'd like to put into the Google Meet. And just as a reminder, there will be a second open public comment section later in the meeting once we go through our agenda. Sure.
One comment from Melissa Keenan, 71 Woodstone Road. Thank you to the board for the recent decision on masking. It is deeply appreciated.
No email comments.
Seeing no other comments, I'm going to close our first public comment section at 8:47 p.m. and we'll move on to our agenda. We'll start with old business, no action to be taken. Mr. Capello, would you mind walking us through?
Sure, I'd be happy to. At our next meeting, we will be reviewing and taking action on items A, B, and C. A, our reports from January 2022, Treasurer of School Monies and Board Secretary. B, our education reports, student enrollment from January 2022, report of health office, January 2022, HIB case BV 212206, and HIB case BV 212207. And finally, the minutes from our organizational meeting of January 6, 2022, our work regular session and executive session meeting of January 6, 2022, and our regular session and executive session meeting January 24th, 2022.
Any questions or comments on old business for our next meeting? Seeing none, we'll move on to new business action to be taken. Mrs. Wagner, would you mind moving us to personnel, please?
Okay, so tonight I'd like to move items A, number 1 goes to A through T, as well as 2 through 8. These include new hires, resignations, retirements, employee leaves, extra pay, salary adjustments, and that list does include hires for our summer programming.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Wagner. Thank you, Mr. Capello. Any questions on personnel?
Just congratulations to Mrs. Bloom on her retirement.
Thank you very much.
And the district will be training 2 new bus drivers. Yes, great things for us.
A lot of great news from the business office tonight. Keep it up, Damaris. Any other questions or comments on personnel? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Capello?
Yes.
Mrs. Wagner,
Yes.
Mr. Cass,
Yes.
Mr. Kim,
Yes.
Dr. Aruna Jitasan,
Yes.
Dr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes. Mr. Capello, would you mind moving us through instruction and program, please?
I'd be happy to. If there are no objections, I would like to move item 1 under instruction and program, that the board approve the attached proposal for professional development for Dr. Forte, Mrs. Dorowski, Dr. Cullis, Mr. Anderson, myself, with Donna Dennis of Leadership Solutions at a total cost of $1,100.
Second. Thank you, Mr. Capello. Thank you, Mr. Kim.
I have a procedural question. Can you and I vote on it?
I was going to ask Mrs. Gorowski the same question.
You can abstain from those as long as we have a quorum.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions on instruction and program? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Capello,
Abstain?
Mrs. Wagner,
Yes.
Mr. Cass,
Yes.
Mr. Kim,
Yes.
Dr. Aruna Jitasan,
Yes.
Dr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
Abstain? All right, Mr. Kim, would you mind moving us through finance, please?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I motion that we move section C, finance, numbers 1 and 2, as seen in the agenda, to approve the submission of the amendment of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act IDEA application for fiscal year 2022 and accepts the grant award of funds upon subsequent approval of the fiscal year 2022 IDEA application for the amounts of $362,622 for the basic public, as well as preschool for $22,032. And also under number 2, to extend the agreement with Lunch Speech Services LLC for the speech therapy services from February 14th of this year to June 23rd of this year, when school is in session.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Kim. Thank you, Mr. Cass. Any questions on finance?
Was this a pre-approved application? I mean, it seems like we just have to submit the application and now we're just getting, and then we will get the funds.
This is a pre-approved IDEA application. Originally was approved back in May when the application was submitted. And just recently they increased this grant by $908. So we need to reapprove it again.
Okay, I thought it would look familiar, so thank you.
On the first one, on number 2, it's Luch, L-U-C-H. I think the spell check switched to lunch, so it's L-U-C-H.
I was going to ask that question. Thank you, Dr. Forte. Mr. Kim, Mr. Cass, are you fine with that amendment?
Okay. Yep, I'm fine with it as well.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Capello,
Yes.
Mrs. Wagner,
Yes.
Mr. Cass,
Yes.
Mr. Kim,
Yes.
Dr. Aruna Jitasan,
Yes.
Dr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes. Okay, we're going to move on to new business, no action to be taken. Mrs. Wagner, would you mind moving us through this section for personnel?
Certainly. So at the next meeting, myself or a fellow board member will be moving under personnel items 1 through 7, which are what the board is aware of now. I'm sure that was referred to now and then. It includes new hires, resignations, retirements, leaves, extra days.
Any questions on personnel for our next meeting? All right, Mr. Capello, would you mind moving us through IMP for our next meeting?
Sure, it's a pretty easy one.
Yeah.
I or someone else will be moving items under workshops and expenses, which at this time there are none listed.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Capello. Policy revisions, I'll just quickly move through here. Myself or someone for our next meeting will move policy revisions, included on the agenda, there are 4 items, 3 for first reading and 1 for second reading and adoption. Any questions? Mr. Kim, would you mind moving us through finance for the next meeting?
Sure, myself or someone else will be moving Section D Finance, which includes a list of checks under Section 1, and number 2, the donation of $2,500 from the Denville Municipal Alliance to fund the Hbac Grant program for the elementary schools.
Questions, comments? Glad to see that presentation or program is coming back. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Forte, did we only do it at Riverview last time, I think? It was brought to us, I think, from someone from Riverview. I thought it was somebody who had a relationship with Hbac Grant.
It only was, yes, it was only Riverview last time, because yes, we do have, there is a teacher that is friends with him.
Excellent. Well, glad to see that we are doing it across 2 schools, and thank the Denville Municipal Alliance for their funding of that. So, any other questions? All right, Mr. Cass, would you mind moving us through operations for our next meeting?
Sure. At the next meeting, we have 2 items for the board to approve. Under transportation, I'm going to ask the board to approve the following professional development workshops with expenses for staff members. Under transportation, we have our Director of Transportation, Stacy Greenhagen, to go to an annual conference in Atlantic City. Another buildings and grounds, we have our facilities manager, Mike Chmielewski, to go to Atlantic City also for a conference.
Thank you, Mr. Cass. Any questions on operations for our next meeting? We're going to move on to go to the cause. Before I do that, I'm just going to make everybody from the public aware if you're online. Soon will be coming our open public comment section number 2. If you're interested in making a comment, you can go ahead and type that in the chat with your name, address, and the comment, or you can email to BOE meetingcomments@denville.org. So just proactively put that out there so you can get ready and start putting the information in. But we'll move on to Good of the Cause, committee reports, correspondence, discussion items, and other. We'll start off with board meeting highlights. Anybody want to chime in? Obviously, Dr. Grip's demographic study.
I have, if you don't mind, I'll just give you what I have so far. Dr. Grip's study, including the links to the PowerPoint and the report itself, the district grants for HVAC, 2 different grants, and the donation from the Denville Municipal Alliance to fund the program from Hbac Grant.
Anybody have anything else? Do we want to hold off on the Hbac Grant program until we vote on it at the next meeting?
Yeah, I forgot about that. Thank you.
Okay.
But I won't have anything to say then either, so you got to sit, can't preload it.
Anybody have anything else for the good of the cause?
I have a brief comment. I want to thank the school district for fast-tracking Hubstocker's application for use of the Lakeview 2 gyms over the next several Sundays. We got bumped from Morris Knolls. The high school always had priority on use of the gym, and they have a fencing tournament the next couple of weekends, and I believe some other events too. So we were able to get to Lakeview gyms. We had a great session this past Sunday there, and it was nice to catch up with Jerry Marinelli. Manella, right? He was there guarding. He was doing guard duty at the school. So again, we were very appreciative of that.
Thank you, Mr. Cass. Any other comments for the good of the cause?
I've got a couple real quick. I just want to thank Mr. Cohen. I really do want to shout it out because he was an advocate for the demographic study, and the rest of us were pretty skeptical. I was very skeptical after sitting through a couple that were, as Mr. Cass said, terrible. So I just want to say thank you for sticking with that and advocating. It was really a fantastic presentation. I started to get into some of the data. It's excellent. I'm going to spend some more time with it, so thank you.
Yeah, if I may, I want to thank you for and the rest of the board for having faith in my belief in this study. I was gonna pat myself on the back, but now I realize we've got work to do, taking this study and making it actionable. I do believe that the operations committee, we're gonna have a lot to discuss, other than, of course, the budget, the finance budget, because if these numbers and these projections do pan out, it will get tight, and if it does continue 5 years beyond these projections, then even subpar, building facilities like trailers might not be enough as well. So I was just looking at the old Hbac study, and one of the numbers that wasn't seen in Dr. Grip's his slide, the student enrollment for the year just before he was able to get that information was 1,800 students. So that I think was one of the reasons why we needed the trailers, and so we do have a lot, I believe, to discuss on how we want to process this data and then make it actionable, because clearly we don't want to, we want the children to have the best possible education space that they deserve. We did have a finance, operations, and transportation committee meeting prior to today, or just prior to this meeting. So I did send out the minutes before this meeting, so you should see it in your inboxes. I did want to clarify one thing. I believe that Ms. Gorowski is shortchanging herself, because she mentioned that we'll be receiving 75% of the $407,000 grant and application, or it sounded that way, which I don't think she intended. Essentially, we are going to be receiving up to $407,000 in grant money, and we have to match it with 25%. So that, I think, is just again an example of how great the administration is in terms of trying to make sure that the board has the proper funding. There was also a secondary grant of $36,000 that was received just 3 days ago. We will also be putting up for resolution the field bathroom at Valley View because of the fact that there is no restroom or bathroom access with the new field at Valley View. So you should see that also in the next agenda, which didn't make it to this regular session agenda. So that's going to be estimated of $120,000 in cost, which will be coming from reserves. We do want to pre-approve it before the budget approval because of supply chain issues and everything else. We want to get it in the books. I also am going to try to push to see if we can get, after talking with Ms. Growski, the architects to look at the HVAC for Valley View, cafeteria, band, and art room, because that $407,000 will disappear 12 months from now. So if there are going to be supply chain issues similar to what we saw with Riverview's HVAC system, then I'd hate to see us lose that. So we're going to try to push that as well for the next meeting. And finally, I do think that I need to spend a second on the budget report. I do want to thank Dr. Forte and Ms. Gorowski, because as well as the rest of the committee, Mr. Karas, as well as Dr. Aruna Jatasan. So we've been having a lot of meetings, and we have been going back and forth, and you will see different attachments in the minutes. Please reach out to one of us for further explanation. We can certainly give that to you. We are going back and forth, and I am reserving some of my comments from the public because some of it's still sensitive. So we want to make sure that we try to get the best possible budget for the next upcoming year. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kim. Any other comments for the good of the cause?
I've got one, and I just wanted to bring it to everybody's attention. You may have heard about it, and it's not necessarily for right this second item, but there's State Bill S464, which is the bill that would allow us to use snow days as remote learning days. It's something that I've heard from a few parents. They asked me about it. Basically, instead of it being a snow day, you could turn it into a virtual learning day, like obviously we did during COVID. I have very mixed feelings about that. I was curious if anybody had any real thoughts. Again, this is not something for today, and this may not pass, but I personally think snow days are a right of childhood that I wouldn't necessarily want to take away from our children. But I was just curious if anybody had any real thoughts about it. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not really sure how I feel about it long term, but it's out there. It's out there, so.
Mr. Capella, do you know when it goes to vote?
I do not. It's been bouncing around, I think, in the Senate committee, so I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's actually, I looked it up right before, but I couldn't find that, so I'm not 100% sure.
The current rule is if there's a state of emergency and it lasts for 3 days, on the 4th day you can use a virtual day. That's the current rule. To me, it would make sense to say maybe after the 1st day you could do it, or if you've depleted, well, maybe not, because then they won't put snow days in their calendar. So I'm not crazy about the thing that there would be no snow days at all, but I think it would be great to be able to say on the 2nd day, yes, you could, or the 3rd day. If you have a big blizzard and it takes a long time to clear in a town like ours with all the busing everywhere, we have had ones that have lasted into a 3rd day, I believe. So even if it was on the 3rd day, maybe that would be a good compromise, just in my opinion.
Yeah, that was my general feeling shooting from the hip is I don't like the idea of getting rid of snow days. However, I like the option of it. That doesn't, what Dr. Forte is talking about doesn't mean that we would have to do it. It just gives us the ability to, right? So I like to have the ability to, because I'm thinking there could be crazy scenarios where you have so many snowstorms where you have like 1 or 2 days, then 1 or 2 days, and we're on the 8th snow day or beyond the 5 that we have in our calendar, which I think we're one of the few districts that probably still do 5. I don't think anybody does more than 5. So I am in favor of keeping snow days the way they are as normal, but having the ability to, because everybody wants snow days until you have to start going further into the summer, and then they don't want you to give that up either. So, or take away spring break. So I think there's a balance on it, and I think if we have the ability to do it, but we don't plan on doing it, I'm okay with that. If that makes sense. Because the bill's not going to tell you have to do it. It's just going to say you have the ability to. So.
Yeah, I think it could get complicated too with parents that work from home and teachers with small children. I have a bit mixed feelings. I like the idea of having the option, but I would want to really think it through before we actually use that option.
To me, the option would be you're in a catastrophic situation. And I go back to the previously referenced October snowstorm, and if you did virtual back then, probably a lot of students wouldn't be able to attend because they couldn't get out of their neighborhoods. So the option should be there. We need it, but it have to be pretty bad. And I mean, I enjoyed the snow days when I was a kid. I used to go out with some of my neighborhood friends and would make some good money going out and showing people's driveways and walks. You don't see as much of that anymore, but I do see kids out there doing some shoveling and making some money. So it's, I think it's a rite of passage to get some snow days when you're a kid.
I'm a big fan of 3 months of summer vacation.
The only problem with giving the option, to be honest with you, and then I think about it, is that I feel like it turns into when districts started opening up before Labor Day, now everybody does it. So once you start, then all of a sudden parents are going to be like, I have every other opinion, like I want an extra week of summer vacation, I want 2 weeks of spring break or whatever, right? So I guess that's my, now that I think about it, I guess, I like having the option, but maybe if there are some guardrails in there, like Dr. Forte kind of talked about, and at least you're doing it for the catastrophic scenario, like Mr. Cass talked about.
Well, that was my concern bringing it up, because I was thinking about you're always going to have a difference of opinion on exactly when that should kick in. So, but I appreciate it. And like I said, this was kind of an idle thought. I'm just curious what everybody thought.
So just if there's any legislators listening, it sounds like the district is in favor of more control within the district, but we would like to reserve the right to make that decision for ourselves versus being forced to make the decision.
Thank you, Mr. Capello. Any other good of the cause? Seeing none, we're going to move on to our second open public comment section. This portion of the meeting is open to any individuals for the purpose of addressing resolutions on this agenda or matters that they find important to the Board of Education and is governed by Board Policy 0167. Prior to making a comment, members of the public are required to state their name, address, and the subject matter of the comment. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. No participant may speak more than once on the same topic until all others who wish to speak on this topic have been heard. Comments made by the members of the public may or may not be responded to by the board or district administration. Any responses that is provided will be made at the end of the public comment period after all comments have been heard. The board asks that members of the public be courteous and mindful of the rights of other individuals when speaking. Students and employees have specific legal rights afforded by the laws of New Jersey. Therefore, comments regarding specific students and employees will not be responded to by the board. The board bears no responsibility, nor will it be liable for any comments made by members of the public. Members of the public should consider their comments in light of the legal rights of those affected or identified in their comments, and be aware that they are legally responsible and liable for their comments. All comments, questions, or inquiries should be directed to the board president. And it is 9:12, and I'm going to open our second public comment section. Once again, you can make a comment by emailing BOE meetingcomments@denville.org or putting the comment into the chat. In either scenario, please include your name and address for the record. Dr. Forte, I do not see any in the email box. Can you confirm?
I just refreshed and there's none in there.
We will just wait a minute here like we did earlier to see if any comments come in via the chat. While we wait a minute, I know earlier Ms. Keenan had thanked the board for appreciated for the discussion on masking. I just wanted to make a quick comment while we're waiting to see if there's any other public comments, that we appreciate the public's support as we work through ever-changing landscape of different requirements and whatnot. So we appreciate everybody's feedback. We've received quite a few emails to the board in regard to the masking announcement from the governor. So we appreciate the feedback and the patience as we work through it.
A comment just came in. I can read it if you'd like. This is from Donna Sosinski, 64 Pier Place. I agree, kids need snow days, but for blizzards, virtual would be helpful. Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you for your comment, Mrs. Zazinski. And just while we're leaving it open for public comments, just one more note. Moving forward as we continue to perfect and clean up the way we do our virtual meetings, we will continue to have email available to make comments. We will continue to be in person as we are right now, and members of the public are welcome to come to the meeting. We will be just turning off the chat section of the meeting. But once again, members of the public can email BOE meeting comments at any point, either prior to the meeting or during the meeting. As long as we receive it before the open public comment section, we'll be glad to read those comments aloud. And once again, we certainly welcome people, members of the public, to come in person also. I I see no comments in the chat section. Dr. Forte, can you just confirm an email? I don't see any, is that correct?
No comments in the email either.
Okay. I am going to close our second open public comments at 9:15 p.m. We do have a need for executive session, correct, Dr. Forte?
Yes, we do.
Just for the public, we will not be voting on any items after the executive session. Mr. Kim, would you mind bringing us to executive?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I motion that we move to convene in executive session in accordance with Section 8 of the Open Public Meetings Act. The purpose of this closed session will be to discuss
Personnel and student matters.
issues. Minutes of the session will be made available to the public when the need for confidentiality no longer exists.
Second?
Thank you, Mr. Kim. Thank you, Mr. Capello. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.